What is good, everyone? Welcome to the Outside the Box podcast. I just had an incredible conversation with my friend Justin Valley, who has owned a couple of boutiques over the years. Um, and as you can see from the thumbnail, if you're watching this on YouTube, he showed up in a Kanye graduation bear, full on like pro level costume. So unfortunately, I couldn't hear him. Otherwise, we probably would have done more of the interview. So we don't have any clips of him in the costume, but as you can see, it's pretty entertaining. So I'm still having a laugh, a couple hours after we recorded. So um, anyway, this conversation was really incredible, and I think the best part about it is Justin is he's just one of the most interesting people I know. He has an incredible experience as a military veteran, as a entrepreneur, as a his life in corporate America. Like, there's just a lot of things that shape how he approaches running a business, and more specifically how it shapes his interest in sneakers and streetwear and all the things around it. But we also got to talk about the Robinhood and Gamestop stock exchange, kind of chaos that's been going on the last couple of weeks. And he had some interesting insights on that. So we jump right into that. I'm going to shut up and get right into it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy this, leave me a review on iTunes, like, favorite, subscribe, whatever platform you're on. I just appreciate you guys. Hey, what's good, everyone? Welcome back to the Outside the Box podcast. My name is Nick Engvall. This podcast is all about kind of getting a little more insight into the sneaker world, giving you opportunity to think a little bit differently, learn about the career paths, the opportunities that exist that don't always get talked about, and maybe provide some insight into like navigating those areas a little bit better. So on today's episode, I have my good friend Justin on with me. Justin is a longtime veteran in the sneaker game and has had multiple shops now. But I'm gonna just let me just toss it to you, man. How you been? How's life treating you?
Good. What's good? What's good? How you been? I've been trying to stay safe in the pandemic, man. It's dangerous out here. Well,
Seriously.
actually, in the words of Meek Mill, it's a pandemic, man. We just trying to get money out here, man. It's a pandemic, and we're not even worried about the pandemic. I know we holding the line on GameStop. Actually, I'm not holding the line on GameStop. Like, I'm gonna leave GameStop alone. That's
Man,
not for me.
that was the
That's
whole
not for the faint at heart.
yeah, it was the whole thing. Although I gotta say, like, I'm pretty disappointed in Robinhood, man. Like, shutting it down. Like, I'm not in on any of those, but like I do use
No, you
Robinhood,
gotta
and
no, hold on.
I no
I gotta
longer
stop you
use
there.
Robinhood.
No, I got to stop you there. You see, the problem with that is, let me give you a quick explanation on why they had to shut it down, right? Because what happens is, when you place that trade, right,
Yeah,
that transaction doesn't actually happen right then, right? Robinhood
exactly.
floats
Yep,
that money.
yep.
So what happened is they were like, "Yo, I don't know if I got this money." Think about it this way, right? It's like you trying to buy all the sneakers, right? You probably got some money in your account. You're trying to buy sneakers, right? And so the credit card company is like, okay, I'm gonna try to buy these sneakers for you and float you this money. But you keep trying to buy all these off whites, right? You're trying to buy the whole off white collection, and then they say, well, hold on, player. I don't know if you can get this whole off white collection because I ain't got enough money to drop for this whole off white collection. So that's what happened in Robinhood. They were like,
Yeah.
well, all these people doing all these trades, we might not have enough money to float for all this trades. So it was actually good that Robinhood did that, because if they didn't, they could have screwed a lot of people over, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, think
Yep.
about it. If they didn't have the money to float and they went bankrupt, now everybody just lost all their money and they just write off all the money that people had in there. So it was a smart move on their part to do it. It just came in a bad time, right? It was just a bad time. And
Yeah, for
I mean, I
sure.
just read that they got all this funding, right? All this funding for to be able to float more trades, right? So
Yep.
it was smart on their part, right? And I mean, you got to remember, billions of people were doing trades. People were taking their small little money and just buying trades like crazy, and
Yeah.
so I it sucks because it came at a terrible time, but it was good for Robinhood and for most people who are trying to trade. But yeah, I
Well,
do understand. I do get why it sucks, but it's really bad.
yeah, I totally understand the logistics of it behind the scenes, right? I think my my initial reaction was like, come on, like you can't do this, right? And then understanding like, okay, well, they literally are going to screw everybody if they mess this up. But the one thing that frustrated me the most was like, the day that all happened, Twitter being like just lit on fire with all this like, Robinhood, GameStop stuff. Um, the CEO went on to, CNBC or whatever it was, and basically like said that wasn't the reason that they stopped, that it was a multiple reasons. And I'm like, there's no way. In my mind, I'm thinking like exactly what you said. There's no way they had enough money to actually cover all this stuff if things
Yeah,
went bad, right? And like, I would rather him just acknowledge that and be like, yo, like the world changed in an instant and we weren't prepared for it, so we had to hit the pause button. If he would have said that, I might have been like, okay, cool. But the problem for me is like, like don't be like every other CEO glossing over, the bad things, right? Like we need transparency at this point, because if we don't, we end up back in this situation that we had in 2008 where millions of people lose their homes. I mean, we are in that situation
yeah,
from the pandemic, but like, we don't need like that on top of this kind of stuff. And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
like that whole like covering your ass thing that happens with like executives and PR people, it's like, look, man, we're tired of the BS, man. It's
Transparency,
not to
man.
get
Just
political, but it's
just
been four plus years of BS. We're ready for boring old, sleepy Joe, whatever you
but
want
not,
to say. And like, let's just do what the right thing is in these conversations instead of trying to spin it. Because at the end of the day, people
in
rather
50
connect with
different
you for
ways, right?
being honest about stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I always say this, right? Most CEOs just shouldn't go in front of a camera and talk about the company, bottom line,
Yeah,
because they try to play that, like that political uptight game, and they don't have most of them don't have the proper verbiage to be able to talk through situations. And when you get interviews from a journalist, that's their job, is to catch you in something. That's just naturally their role, right?
yeah,
And unless you're PR trained, which most of these CEOs aren't, they shouldn't do it, right? And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a brand, right? Let's say LeBron James wears the Los Angeles sneaker history hoodie, right? And going into one of his games, right? He wears that hoodie, right? They see him down the ramp. Guess what? Everybody's trying to buy that hoodie right now, right? Nick, can you produce a million of those hoodies overnight? No, because guess what? I don't have the capital for that stuff. I can't support that stuff. So
yeah,
now you're going on there, you try to spin it like, oh, there's multiple ways. Just go on there and be like, yo, I don't got the cash for that stuff. I just had a little printing stuff in my garage. I was pushing out some products. I was probably 1,000 orders in one night. That's never happened to me before. I don't have the infrastructure to
yeah,
manage that, right? And that's what happened. And he should have just went on there and said that. Mark Cuban did a tweet and he said Mark Cuban said it, but he didn't explicitly directly say. He's like, yo, they just didn't have the money to float it, right? So,
yep,
and that's what really happens with these smaller, brokerage firms, right? And the crazy part about it is, come on, man, let's be honest. These guys aren't doing gamma squeezes on the hedge fund guys, right? Like I have two friends who work in hedge funds and who worked in hedge funds, and they're laughing about it because guess what? These guys have these hedge funds. All they do is trade. That's their life. So you
yep,
think you're really squeezing them? You don't think they're making money in the opposite direction? Also, they're smart enough to figure out like we should probably move some money or move some money. That's what they do. They is to react to markets, right? So they
yep.
react to the market. And I just read BlackRock made like $3 billion, right?
I saw that
BlackRock's the
too. Yeah,
top hedge fund in the country, probably in the world, and they made $3 billion off the trade, right? Off the GameStop stuff. You think other, so it's just I think the hardest part for me is I am happy to see a lot of people get money out of it, but I just don't want to see people lose their shorts riding this wave. And
yep,
I'm saying that continuously because it's true, right? People are trying to cash out their kids' college fund. People are using their life savings on it just to follow this wave to make some money. And they don't realize it's deeper than that. And you can, I mean, what is it? $200 today, $100 today, $175 something this morning. I looked and I was like, all these people who are holding the line, right? They just lost their whole life savings because they bought it at 375 and they spent
yep,
$60,000 and now they have nothing, right? They just took a 50-60% hit on the price, right? And it's like, dude, you just lost all your money. So that's the part that worries me, right? And then also a lot of these people saying hold the line, they're doing options and options, right?
Yep.
So they're not really buying full shares, right? They're doing options, so they're making way more money than people who are just buying individual stocks. So yeah, it's a whole game. Uncle Johnny and I talk about it all the time, and we always laugh, right? Like he always hit me. He's like, you see what this madness is going on. So we always laugh because it's crazy because what happened is lack of education, right? And
Yeah.
it's like anything else, like the sneaker industry, retail industry. There's lack of education, so all these people they just try to ride a quick wave to make a quick buck. But there's no such thing as a quick buck, right? Like you gotta you probably I don't know if you ever see it, but there's like option gangs on Twitter, right? Like
Yep.
that dude Carl, he's like hardcore into it, right? Like he invested in the platform, he's into it. That's his daily life, right? Salute to him because he started off slow and then he just got into it heavy and he just invested more and more money and he paved the way for it. And he talks about it, right? And he's like he even says like you can't get emotional in this kind of stuff, right? Like
Yep.
you have to make money, and a lot of people are getting emotional, like oh GameStop, no, like it's just a flip. You're trying to make some money, and people don't realize that. And you gotta know when to get out, you gotta know to get in, and he even said it right. He's not getting into a lot of the ones that everyone is going after because it doesn't make sense, and for him it doesn't make sense because he has been doing it consistently. He knows the market trends. He probably got a crazy stock trading dashboard up on his computer, so he
Yep.
knows what's going on. But the average person like me and you, I don't have a Bloomberg. I'm not paying $1,500 to get
Yeah.
a Bloomberg dashboard. I don't care about that stuff enough, right? I'm buying stuff that I like, right? Like I'll buy some Tesla, I have some Apple, I have some Nike, buy the stuff you like, right? Like for you it'd be like Honda, like you like
Yeah.
Honda. There's no reason why you shouldn't have some Honda, some Adidas stocks, that's the stuff we should be buying, right?
Well, I think
So
I
it's
think
it's
that's the
crazy.
interesting thing, right? You make a good point about like the education side of it, right? And that's kind of, I mean, just to like swing this back towards sneakers, right? Like you the point that you made about if LeBron walks out in a sneaker history hoodie, I can't afford to make enough sneaker history hoodies for that type of exposure and the demand that's going to come from that.
No, no
It's going to
way.
be very short spiked too, right? You never know how long that will last. But like with your experience, like so just to give a little background, let's talk about like Soul Lab and Prospect, like two shops. What 10 years in now? Like
Yeah, 10 years, 10
yeah.
years, 10
So
years, 2011. Yeah,
so Soul Lab was it was in Oceanside. What do you do? Six years there, I think.
11 to yeah, 6 years, 11 to
And then
15. 6 years, yeah, but roughly 6 years. Let's go with
so
6 years, 5.5, 6 years, yeah.
had a small boutique in Oceanside, North County, San Diego. Then took a little break, moved back into or moved to Prospect and did that in Pacific Beach for a year or two. And then
Yeah.
obviously the pandemic hits and now things are a bit different. But thinking about like that analogy that you mentioned, how do you approach two things? How do you approach, you know, like buying product that's like super hyped like that, right? Because you've had some really successful stuff of your own brand with Prospect in the last few years. But then on the flip side of that, like talking about the emotional thing, right? Like I think one of the challenges for me, if I was in your shoes as a store owner who's doing the buying for the shop and making sure the product is there, is getting emotionally attached to the stuff that's coming down the line and just buying all the colors that I like.
Can't do that. You absolutely cannot do that. And I might have told you the story before, but I remember 10 Deep. We had 10 Deep account in Soul Lab, and a lot of stuff 10 Deep had was like eclectic. 10 Deep's a little different, right? And I mean, so I was super cautious on the stuff that I'd buy. I'd be like, damn, I would never wear something like this, right? Because I mean, I'm plain Jane. I mean, right now, if you 90% of the time are in a black tee, some blue jeans, and a pair of black sneakers or some random off weird color sneakers, right? I'm not trying to be flashy or anything, but Ten Deep was, is that brand, right? Like it teaches their own. And I remember they had some crazy stuff, man, and the crazy pattern. This has been cut and so it was growing, getting bigger, and they had a they had a shirt, a button-down shirt. It was like maybe I want to say about $96, man. And I was like, dog, no one in Oceanside is buying a $96 shirt. And my rep was just pushing me. He's like, yo, try them, man. He's like, let's make a deal. Try these cut and sew pieces, and if nobody buys them, we can figure something out to get them back. I was like, all right, I'll try it. We bought. It was like I probably bought like I don't know, like 10 pieces of four different cut and sew shirts, right? I'm talking about $96 shirts, right? So if they don't sell, I'm eating that right because it's $100 shirt. Probably pay $50 for it. So that's $500 just in one style of a shirt, right? So I remember I bought it. Kendrick Lamar wore one of their shirt, 10 deep shirt. I can't remember the color or which shirt it was, but I remember Kendrick Lamar wore the shirt, and that sent those 10 deep shirts spiraled and down, man. People came and just bought all the 10 of that particular shirt. They bought all 10 right away, like overnight. Like I don't know how people knew we had it, if it's from social media or something. When we got it, we posted it, but people bought all of those 10 deep shirts. And then we didn't have those shirts anymore because we only bought 10. And then all the other 10 deep cut and short shirts, people started buying them, right? And I'm talking about this is $100 button down short sleeve shirt, dog. Like you buying $100 button down short sleeve shirt, you gotta be. It's expensive, right? Like
Yeah.
I mean, come on, let's like guys. That's a bespoke, corporate office shirt, right? $100 is an expensive button down shirt, right?
I mean,
Short sleeve.
yeah, corporate employed Nick back in the day is hesitant to spend $100 on a polo that I really appreciate, like a polo button down shirt, right? And like you and I had that same appreciation for polo back in the day, right? But I'm not
Yeah,
spending a hundred
it's a
dollars.
good shirt, right?
I'm gonna find a like 45, 50, $60 version of it.
Yeah, I mean, and so you buy a $96 10D button-down shirt. The problem with these shirts is it's not like you can wear them regularly, right? It's like you wear them once. You might wear them once on a hot day with a girl, right? Your first date to impress the girl. You might pull it out on a second time randomly, but you're not wearing it regularly, right? If I buy $100 bespoke long sleeve shirt for corporate, I'm probably wearing that every week at least, right? I'm wearing it
Yeah.
once a week at least, right? So but yeah, dudes, all those shirts, man, gone, man. I
maybe
mean, girls
maybe
are
it's
coming
just
in to buy them for.
because you and I aren't the types to be living in the club, and maybe we just didn't see it. Like maybe that was the move,
Man,
right? Every Friday in the same shirt downtown
I don't
San
know,
Diego.
man. Yeah, probably right. That's probably what it is, right? Literally. Yeah, I remember girls are coming in and buying the shirts for their boyfriends. I'm talking about, it's like $96, right? And we were down the block from the high school. We're probably like, I remember we were like $3 down from the high school. Ocean Sage High School is pretty prominent. I mean, Junior Seau went there. Rest in peace, Junior Seau. He went there. I mean, he was always up there. He lived down the block on the beach also, so you always see him walking by. Um, but the high school was prominent for football. Pretty big for football because Junior Seau went there. They had a few basketball people, and then track and field, some soccer players and stuff like that. And it's a pretty, I would say, well-off school, right? So, but still, you're in high school, you buy a $96 button-down shirt in 2012, 2013. That's an expensive shirt. I don't care what anybody says.
Yep.
That's an expensive shirt, right? So yeah, so that kind of transcended things overnight, right? Because we didn't have the we didn't initially have all those cut and sew pieces because as a buyer, I don't want to try it because one, it's not something I'm into, right? It's not something I wear, and two, it just didn't seem feasible for the area, right? Until that one thing happened that transcends overnight, like you said, like LeBron wearing that hoodie, right? Like now I'm like that. Those are the areas where I started to be like, okay, well, I can't just buy what I like because again, we can't just buy what you like. If I was to buy what I like, I'd buy all black tees, all blue jeans, and that's all I'll sell, right? Like I'd be like you'd be like a Gap or Old Navy, right? So you can't really do that. You really have to like think outside the box. And I remember I was trying to tell the kids, the guys who worked at the shop in Prospect, I was like, hey, you can't make product for yourself, right? That's not like well, I'm wrong. You can't make product for yourself, but it's really tough, right? Because you might have eclectic taste. You have to make something that you would like that other people would like. That's kind of well rounded, right? And that's the kind of thing that I feel like really does well, right? Like if you look at ALD or Kith or Concepts, any one of those big retailers when they do their private label stuff, it's like it's stuff that you would see those guys would actually wear, but it's also stuff that the average consumer can wear, right? Because it's not too crazy, it's not too loud, right? Like I think about a lot of this stuff, and if you look, their offerings are pretty diverse, right? They don't sell strictly minimal stuff. They don't sell strictly over the top stuff. They kind of sell a little bit of everything, which they kind of capture every piece of the market, right? Like there's that overlap, right? If you look at the Venn diagram that you always see people on
Yeah.
Twitter draw, right? Like here's the people who are super into like the minimalist stuff, like guys like me and you who will pay a little bit more money for quality minimal, and then there's the people who would pay for all the over the top loud all over print stuff like that, and then there's the people in the middle. So you know you're capturing those people in the middle every single time. But then when you drop to minimal stuff, you have this whole crowd of people here who are going to be like, yeah, this minimal stuff I'm rushing to because it just has a small logo hit here, or it
Yeah.
has a small logo hit on the pen, something. But then the same thing with the loud stuff. Like, I mean, you see it in the subreddits all the time. Like, I'm in a bunch of streetwear subreddits and groups, right? And I see them, and you can see the disparity, right? Where they talk about, hey, I don't want to buy this. This stuff isn't for me because it's too loud, or this stuff isn't for me because it's too minimal, right? So, as a buyer, you have to really think about the entire community, right? And not just your direct community. Like, like you've helped us expand, like help me expand outside of just the local San Diego area to go bigger and beyond outside of it, right? So you have to think about those people, right? Like the kid in San Antonio who's gonna need it. The girl from Louisiana who just bought a pair of New Balances from us, or the kid from New York who's buying a Prospect pullover or something, right? Like you got to make sure it covers everyone, and somewhere else can still use it, right? Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck in that small little bubble, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you can't really just buy stuff that you like. It just doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it works for a small niche, right?
Yeah. It's crazy too. Cause like, I mean, in one sense, I'm kind of curious what you think about this, but I almost feel like we kind of live in this like pendulum of streetwear, right? Streetwear and sneakers, right? Where
Yeah,
like the trend goes from like, you know, I think of like you mentioned ALD, Kith, basics, and like everybody's wearing like this kind of, even like the you could take it to like Yeezy or Fear of God, right? It's very much like the same kind of tones, minimal branding. Like, I don't know why, but I think of like Perry Ellis back in the day, right? It was the
yeah,
one brand that
yeah,
you would never see a logo on it, but if you saw it, like if you knew what it was, they made really nice stuff, and but then like kind of like talking about like 10 deep, I think of like Crooks and Castles, and I mean some of the other brands that were around like back 2012. I mean, like the Hundreds and Diamond Supply are kind of easy to name there too, but
yeah,
they're also like they're more I don't know, like I guess like more streetwear than like maybe like sort of high fashiony streetwear. And I'm wondering if
yeah,
like
yeah,
if we've been in this like we've been on that like kind of Kith basics, everybody doing some form of basics for a while, and I'm wondering if we're like getting to the point where we're going to swing back the other way and we'll see some of these upstart brands coming up, because I think there's like those two sides of it, but then there's also like guys like Geo that are doing stuff, which I got to get Geo on here and talk to him about some of the stuff that he's doing, but like more like almost like Off White is kind of the like full on mass produced version of what Geo does,
yeah,
right? It's like literally making it by hand, figuring it out, and doing things that are completely, they don't fit into this like big graphic stuff, they don't fit into like the basics, but it's really nice. And it's more, this is not to put it down, but it reminds me of like kindergarten construction paper and glue supply
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
putting things
yeah.
together, and people like
I
that
agree.
raw element, right? Like it's a very like it's a really really popular thing, and it's popular beyond like apparel and sneakers and stuff, right? It's popular in the creative space with like Tom Sachs, Casey Neistat, all these people that do these like have these massive YouTube audiences, that part of their storytelling just becomes a part of that process of literally cutting up the paper or drawing out whatever. And it's like we're kind of in this weird place where like that's been really really popular for a few years. So I'm wondering which direction it goes from here, right? Because I think like you know like at least to me it seems like Kith, ALD, Fear of God, all of those kind of types are trying to go up the ladder towards, more of a polo or something like that.
Yeah, high fashion.
Yeah, but then you've got like, like for me, it's always about like the kind of counterculture element of it, and I think like we're probably going to get to this point where like those like crazy graphic tees and skate brands are going to be like ultimate trendy, right? And like
A
who is
trend
it that's
again.
going to
Yeah.
wear that ultimately sets it off? I mean, Travis Scott's wearing the dunks, but like, you know, now everybody tries to sell their own merch if they're a celebrity too. So what do you think
Yeah.
about like how all of that's going to play out? And I guess too, like maybe your experience with your own prospect brand of stuff too, because you've been really successful at that in a way that didn't really work with Soul Lab back in the day to the level it has with Prospect.
Yeah, I think so. There's a few parts to that I think about, Nick, is that one, it's if you think of exclusivity, right? So the stuff like Geo's doing is like one of ones, it's like handcrafted pieces, right? So it's limited. So I think in this age where everyone wants to be exclusive, everyone wants to have something that no one else can have, I think that plays a really important part, right? I mean, if you look at some of the stuff, some of these, again, we can use Kith, right? Because he's Ronnie has really like covered a lot of things, right? As instead of as much as I hate to beat a dead horse, but he's really has covered a lot of the things, right? Like the ABC stuff he just did, some of the pieces he did, they were like one of one, they were different and unique. So everyone's rushing to them because you buy it, you have a unique piece that no one has, right? We did a we had a tangerine. This is a funny story. We had our tangerine event we had about a year and a half ago in the back patio, right, of the shop. They had we we wanted to do like a kind of faded color on the Just a Kid from Dago print, and the printers couldn't like get the green to orange fade properly, right? So they all look different, right? And what we did was we just took it and we ran with it as a spin, right? And we advertised it as it's like a tangerine because the event was called Tangerine. It was like a tangerine, how they all ripe different. No tangerine ripes the same. So that's why the fade looks different all the shirt. So people loved it, right? Because it was unique and it's something different. So no one, if you have a tangerine shirt, if two people have a tangerine shirt, right? None of them, the fade looks different, right? Some people, it might be green higher up, might be orange, and people thought it was by design, but it was just an error. And we just said, let's just run with it. And it looks good. It's something and we can sell it as a unique story. Let's do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think people like that exclusivity, right? So the one of one stuff, the off white stuff is limited, like just like sneakers, right? We're trying to get all those off white Jordan ones because it's limited. Only certain people have it. Like if you have a pair of Red Octobers, you're a sneaker god because they only dropped at a certain time on this random Sunday. So you're a sneaker god, so they're going for crazy prices, right? But that's what it is. It's like exclusivity, right? So the stuff Geo doing is super dope, right? Because it's the one of one stuff. It's limited. Think of like you're right. Think of like Hood off white, but go back a little bit further. Think of Hood by Air, right?
Yeah.
Remember the Hood by Air stuff? Like people clowned it for a long time, but a lot of celebrities wore it because it was limited. There's only few pieces. There's only certain people who had it. If kind of think quotation marks. You see it all the
Yeah.
time on Instagram and YouTube, on Instagram or Twitter. But it's really like these guys were trying to be exclusive, right? I mean, and especially right now with the trend of all the celebrities and basketball players, and over the years, I mean, we talked about this before, right? The sneaker culture has transformed massively, right? I mean, now it's like a thing for all these NBA things to have coming down the tunnel and showing what sneakers they're wearing, what clothes they're wearing. That wasn't a thing back then. PJ Tucker rocking the people monitoring what sneakers he wearing
Yeah.
more than what's his stats are, right? Like that's crazy, right? Like I mean, nuts like us, nerds like us, right? Who
Yep.
sneaker nerds, like I don't care what people say, sneaker culture is getting nerdy. It's always been nerdy, right? But like guys like us who've been watching Allen Iverson play, we're like, oh man, he's wearing what in the McDonald's All Star game? Like that's the kind of stuff like we were hyping about way back then, right? I saw, I think it must have been Marv. I mean, you're talking about Marv earlier. It must have been Marv, but he has like the breakdown of which sneakers Jordan wore when, right? Like people weren't like NBA wasn't paying attention to that back then, right?
Yep.
Unless you were a sneaker nerd, nobody was paying attention to that stuff. But now it's like a hype, right? So it's exclusive. And then since everyone's doing it, it's all about now who has the most limited, the most exclusive stuff, who has the off-white sales first, who has this first. So I think that's part of it. And then the other part is like it's a pandemic, man. I told you earlier, man. It's a pandemic, man. Meek Mill said it right. The transfer of money is crazy, right? So all these kids are just buying all these expensive, limited stuff. So I think that the high premium quality stuff is going to stay for a while because I don't know where all this money is coming from. The U.S. Department of Treasury, guns go burr. I don't know, right? But they're just making all this crazy amount of money. Like I mean, like I think about like my kid, right? He does a bunch of crazy stuff with his friends. Like they're selling like Fortnite accounts for like $800. Like people are buying full-fledged Fortnite accounts for $800. My kid's 15. He should be, selling Fortnite accounts with his other two friends for $1,500, right? They entered some Fortnite competition. I guess they came third. They got like $8,000. I'm like, three kids, 15 years old, just made $8,000 on playing video games online. So there's money out there, right? So they're getting this money, and now they're like, okay, well, you know,
Yeah.
Lil Yachty just is wearing these expensive Jordans. I want these Jordans too, so they're gonna buy it, right? And because they're following all these influencer kids, right? YMB Corday, all these kids, and they're buying Travis Scott's, right? Like they want the
Yeah.
Travis Scott SB dunks, right? Because Travis Scott's wearing it. So all the rappers, all the people who influence them, they're buying that stuff. Whereas for us back in the days, it was like Easy E is wearing, a Raiders fitted or a Kings fitted or something or a
Yep.
snapback. And oh, we need that. We're trying to get that. We wouldn't even consider,
Yeah.
Cortez's because Cortez is a thing, Chucks is a thing, right? So it's like one of those things. Like you're trying to figure that out, right? Like Tupac's wearing Grant Hill Feelers, right, on the cover, and you're like, I need those, right? Like that's the kind of it's the same aspect, but Grand Hills were like $100 back then versus Travis Scott SBs for $2,000. It's a little bit of price difference, right? We'll call that inflation.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of the things is like it's really like the high end stuff will stay, right? So I think what we'll start to see is like brands doing the graphic tees and they're not $36 anymore, right? There'll be
Yeah.
a $96 graphic. And I could be totally offline with this, but I mean, like, I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see like $80, $90 graphic tees, and you're like, hundreds tee is $90, or Diamond Supply tee is $90. But that's just how the market swings, right? Like, the
Yeah.
graphic stuff hasn't really left, right? That market is still there. Hundreds is still killing. Diamond is still killing. Nicky Diamond just revamped a new store in LA, right? Like, I
Yep.
mean, they're still killing this. Crooks and Castle is still around. I mean, all those guys are still around. They're still selling stuff, right? Is it as prominent now? Probably it probably still is. We just don't know because we're not in that space as much anymore. But I think the graphic tee is still there. It's just you'll start to see it as it gets more expensive and a little bit more limited, which is tough to make any profit of graphics tees with
Yeah.
it being limited, right? Because I mean, I can tell you if I make 36 just a kid from Dago shirts, it's probably not as profitable at obviously, lower numbers than if I make 60, 64 of those tees, right? Because
Yeah.
72 of those tees, because you'll make the profit just scales exponentially the more you make the volume and all that stuff, right? So selling, unless you have your own production, and even if you have your own production, by the time you do labor, the ink, the blanks and all that stuff, it probably doesn't make sense to make 24 of a graphic tee, right? It all depends, right? But I feel like they'll continue always mass produce these graphic tees. So, but I think the price for graphic tees will go higher at some point, right?
Hmm.
I mean, we see it now. Like graphic tees were like $22, $24 back in the day. You could have went to Zoomies and buy two graphic tees for like $24. Now, I mean, we haven't been to Zoomies in a while, and they're probably closed right now because of the pandemic. But
Yeah.
you might see them, like selling for $36, and it's $48. So I think the price of all these consumer goods are going to shift to a higher price range because now everyone's into streetwear. Every single one's into streetwear. I mean, I remember Kurt talking one time about one of his random bosses coming up to him, like some guy who's high in the company, who's been in the company for like 20 years, emailing asking him about sneakers because he found out Kurt's into sneakers, and you're like,
Yeah.
so I mean, you see what I'm saying? The market has shifted, right? And all these parents are buying streetwear for the kids now. All these kids are super into streetwear now. I mean, there's more money flowing, So I think the prices for all these things are just gonna change, right? And it's gonna increase. And so I don't think it's really gonna I think graphic tees are still going to be there. The pendulum will swing a little bit more, but as the price increases for graphic tees and it becomes a little scarcer, I think it'll become a lot more popular, right? And
Yeah, that makes
it's
sense.
not. And honestly, if you think about it, it's not really cool to support small brands anymore, right? Like it's just not, right? I mean, it used to be cool back in the days to support a small brand, up and coming startup brand, but it's not cool anymore because there's no hype behind it, right? Like like we said earlier, if LeBron wears that Los Angeles sneaker history hoodie coming down the tunnel, you might get a spike for 1,000 units in that one order of that same hoodie, right? But that might taper off because if you think about it right now, rest in peace, Nipsey Hussle. How many people are buying marathon clothing stuff right now, right? It was a hype because everyone wanted to support it, but no one's probably. I mean, I bought marathon clothing stuff before. Johnny and I talk
Yeah,
about it,
me
right?
too.
Like I remember when I first heard, I was like, "Oh, you got a store? I got to go buy something, right? I got to buy something support Nipsey Hussle." And then I remember trying to go on, to buy something else after he passed, rest in peace again, and I couldn't buy anything. And I'm like, okay, so I guess I have a gem, right? And Nipsey Hussle was on a crazy, they were on a crazy way before, right? Because
Yeah.
their their tags had the QR codes, like you could download albums, like special release songs. You could see videos that you would never see online. Like it's hidden gems, and I'm a tech nerd, so I love that kind of stuff, right? And I remember, and I was like, man, this dude's onto something, right? So it's crazy to see that people you get this spike and then it just dies down because it's just a hype thing, it's a wave thing. So I'd be curious to see what their numbers are, right? I mean, I know they had a partnership with Puma, so that probably pushed things a little bit along the way, but they probably haven't seen that influx since he passed, right? Because that's just how the wave goes, right? So it's just you know,
Yeah, I think there's an interesting piece to that too, where uh, like I just searched real quick on Twitter, but I was tweeting about Nipsey Hussle in 2009, right? Most people weren't listening to Nipsey Hussle that long ago, and
no,
and
no,
like I bought marathon stuff. I don't know when I bought it, but like as soon as it was available, right? Like I bought that stuff because like to me, like one like I mean he was the closest to Tupac on the level of like inspiring change in my mind and rapping about things. We talk about it a lot with like the lyrics that like obviously the music is a draw, but like speaking truth within those lyrics that gets people to think a little bit differently is always a draw. And I wonder like how obviously he chose to do it a little bit differently, which is kind of like interesting too, because the marathon and like all of that stuff being his own stuff and never up until the Puma stuff, right? He really stayed out of being, quote mainstream with the collaborations and stuff. And I'm sure he had plenty of opportunities because, everybody that gets any kind of shine, somebody comes along and says, "Oh, we should do something," or, here's this money, just,
yeah,
co-sign us. But so like thinking about that, with being a store owner and doing the purchasing, planning out the product lines, all of those things that you do as like an entrepreneur, how do you kind of balance the, hey, this is like, you mentioned like the Just a Kid from Dago, 36 pieces. How do you balance like knowing that some of this stuff is going to be limited and it's going to have some hype and it's going to create that scarcity creates demand versus like also having stuff available both in store, online, and just like kind of being in this position where, you haven't carried, a major Nike, Adidas, Reebok, Vans, Jordan brand. You haven't carried those like top tier brands, but you've still had, I would say, a decent amount of success with the shop selling a lot of things that I think are curated, and maybe you don't think of it this way, but like you've kind of curated a lot of things that resonate with the things that you like, right? Like you're into
yeah, yeah,
sneakers that aren't necessarily the norm, right? And in a way that's like you said, sneaker nerds, right? Like you and I could talk about New Balance numbering systems in a way that I probably couldn't talk to most people about that, right? And like that's like the level of like just curiosity, but also like there's some cool factor in that, right? To certain people that
yeah,
resonate, right?
yeah. I mean, I think that so funny you said about the New Balance numbering situation system because I remember we had a conversation. I'm pretty sure it's me, you, and Kurt about the Adidas torsion bar. We had this long, it was like an all day group chat conversation. We were just talking about Adidas torsion, and I remember someone was like, "You guys are sick. Why are you guys talking about Adidas torsion all day?" I was like, "Cause you gotta appreciate technology, cause it's like." It was advanced technology at the time, right? It was just super random thought that just came to my head half the sneaker people out there probably don't even understand Adidas torsion, right? They think Adidas been in Boost all their life, right? But if you really go back and look at Adidas torsion, it was way ahead of its time, right? Um, but yeah, I think for me, you said it before. Is like I know you always tell me this. You always say you got to sell your story, right? I'm a super reserved person. I try to keep, my life personal. And you always say, like, you should sell your story. Like, it's unique, it's different. People resonate with it, with selling a story, right? Like, that's just how it is. Um, and I think for me, I've always tried to be a little bit neutral and be a little bit forward in the stuff that, I curate or buy, right? I hate the word curate, by the way, just so you know. But I think people overuse it and they use it in they use it inaccurately. So, but yeah, the stuff that I buy and look at, I mean, it takes me a while, right? I mean, you've seen these books that they send. It's like 50, 60 pages of sneakers, and then you have to figure out. I mean, it's hard because you're buying sneakers for a year away, right? Like, they sent me New Balance stuff and Saucony stuff and Asics stuff for spring of next year. I'm like, dude, I don't even know what's going on in the world today, right?
Yeah.
So one, you have to figure out what stuff you're gonna buy a year from now, right? Trends could totally change from a year from now, right? Like you can buy all these New Balance and somebody could be like, New Balance is the worst sneaker in the world, and no one, it's not, but no one's gonna buy New Balance anymore next year, right? So again, you're taking a gamble, right? That's one thing. Unless it's like a hype sneaker with like some major retailer, like then yeah, it's probably gonna sell because you got those hype beasts out there who are gonna buy the hype sneakers regardless, right? So it's really for me, it kind of boils down to trying to figure out what I would wear and then think of the stuff I wouldn't wear. And then I try to get the stuff that again, Venn diagram that sits in the middle, right? Like there are some eclectic stuff that I'll be like, yeah, I could pull that off. Yeah, I can wear that. Yeah, those sneakers. Maybe if I don't tie my laces, maybe if I tie the laces this time, it might, and drop the jeans right, it might look good, right? So you kind of have to look at that. And then I also have to look at, like, the people. I mean, I work in corporate, right? Also, so the people who I work with who would the stuff they would wear, right? Like the guys I work with, they're not really trying to buy, a Pata 990 or Pata 991. They don't care about, that beautiful material or the pigskin suede. They don't care about none of that stuff.
Yeah.
They just want a basic sneaker that they can get to, right? And I told you this in PB. Our number one selling sneaker was a 997H all black because there were a lot of bars and a lot of restaurants. So what they have to wear, all the cooks, they have to wear black sneakers and they want something comfortable. So we probably sold like 150 pairs of 997Hs, right? And they're $70 sneaker, right? But I would have never thought that. I remember when they first started selling, I was like, this is a trend. So I just bought more and then it just kept selling, right? Because it's one of those things. And honestly, I bought those sneakers because I'm like, I would wear all black sneakers and they're comfortable. This is a cheap pair of sneakers that somebody can buy. So the part that really gets tough is buying the eclectic stuff, like the wild colors, the crazy
Yeah.
color stuff. That's the part that's tough, right? Because how many people are really going to wear a neon green New Balance? Maybe you, maybe me. I mean, the last true hype neon green sneaker we saw was those A Life tennis ball Reeboks, right? Like those are to me, I mean, we've seen like, it's like some Air Maxes like with the long bubble. I forgot which one they were, but to me, the greatest neon green sneaker ever, that's just my personal opinion, was that A Life Reebok pump, right? Like that's my all time favorite. I mean, Reebok pumps don't last. The pump falls off. Mine, the pump is definitely off. I know that. I had the pink pair and I sold it, and then I sold it to the guy, and he told me like less than a month later the pump fell off. So this is Reebok pump, right? But those neon sneakers, tennis ball sneakers, were probably the hottest tennis ball sneakers. Not every. How many people you seen wearing those, right?
Yeah.
It's
Not
like
very
Jeremy
many.
Scott's, right?
Yep.
Like you're probably the only crazy person I've seen wearing all the different Jeremy Scotts, right? Like, I mean, seriously, right? Like you were, you
Hey,
have them all,
don't be
right?
giving
Like,
away my
so
secrets, man. Most people think I'm more subtle on the internet, but I just be wearing whatever random stuff starts
no.
conversations, man.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like it's one of those things where there's like a few people who are gonna wear those, right? So I mean, and some of the sneakers, and honestly, when you see it in the catalog or when you see the images, you're like, yeah, no one's gonna wear this. But when you see it, the sample in person, you're like, wow, this sneakers is amazing, right? And I mean, my New Balance rep, I used to always tell him, he would send me the catalogs, and I was like, I need to see this sneakers in person. He's like, yeah, I'll bring that. So when he brings it and I see it, or even the Asics rep, right? I remember Glenn would bring like some. I would be like, he's like, I know how you are. You got to see it in person. You got to see it in person. And I was like, yeah, because you see a lot of these sneaker concepts or sneaker designs on the catalog or the image on the catalog, and it just doesn't do it justice, right?
Yeah,
You get that Instagram filter on it, right? But when you see it in person, you're like, wow, this sneaker is amazing, right? And it's just one of those things that you kind of have to see a lot of in person. So a lot of eclectic colors is where the hardest part. Like you can buy the basics, like that will sell, right? But the hard part is really getting the eclectic colors. And one, you don't want to sit on it's like I think James Whitner said this. So it's like produce, right? Like you don't want to buy a pair of sneakers from a retailer and it just sits there for 60, 90 days and it's bad. No one's gonna buy it. You might get that one person who might
yeah,
come in and say, oh yeah, I like neon green or I like hot bubblicious pink. I'm gonna buy it, right? Oh, I like guava green or whatever colors they come up with these days. And I like this color. And I have a perfect shirt, right? And before for us, I think sneaker was like the foundation for your outfit back in the day, right? Like, I mean, we talk about, just like getting braces, right? Like you had your braces rubber band matching your sneakers, right? Like
yeah,
that was
yeah,
part of your outfit, right? It was a curated part of that, right? Whereas any sneaker you get, you can pull it off, right? Yeah, you want some hype stuff, but you can get any sneaker and make it look good. Whereas now it's more of the hype stuff. So people aren't really buying sneakers to kind of form their outfit, right? They're just going for hype to form an outfit. So it's tough to buy those eclectic stuff because people aren't really checking for that anymore. They're checking more for the hype stuff, right? And again, I go back to sneaker nerds, real sneaker nerds, you, Robbie, Mikey, all those guys, like from the Sneaker History podcast. I mean, you guys talk about the sneakers, right? Like you guys talk about crazy sneakers that I completely forgot about, right? Um, and those guys, and you were like, yeah, I'm gonna buy this sneaker because I genuinely love sneaker and I can pull the sneaker off, not because it's a hype sneaker, right? You might buy it from some retailer from us from Prospect for 39.99, right? Because we have it on sale, and then next week we see you in the same sneaker and you're like, whoa, is that the same 39.99 sneaker? And it looks crazy, right? Because you have some crazy jacket you got from a thrift store, or you got a crazy sneaker history hoodie to match with it, the black and blue joint. That's what I'm saying, right?
yeah.
So it's not the same anymore, right? It's just not the same. I mean, I still have those Saucony shadows you bought me. How long? The red ones? When did you buy them from the place in LA? Years ago, right? At
Yeah,
least
I don't even remember,
five, six
man.
years ago.
Oh no,
And I still wear them, right? I wear
15
them.
years ago or something, right? It,
Yeah, it was.
it was
It
a
was.
long time
Man, you
ago.
might be right, actually. Yeah, it was. You might be right, actually. I mean, and I still have them, and they're still. And most people would probably be like, "I would never buy that sneaker." People would. I mean, people would be like, "Why are you wearing that sneaker?" Right? And then they'd be like, and I would. The average consumer today would never buy something like that, right? Because Kanye's not promoting it,
Yeah,
LeBron's not wearing it, PJ Tucker's not wearing it, Travis Scott's not wearing it, And I'm gonna be honest to you, most of those sneakers that are hype, they're terrible. I would never wear them. You know, it's
yeah,
just I mean, I know people won't say stuff like that. I mean, we
yeah,
talk about this all the time. And I've heard Brandon Dunn talk about it also. Like people aren't honest with sneakers, right? I Welch talks about also too is like they're just not honest about sneakers, right? They're not honest. They want to save this relationship, right? And if I don't like something, I'm okay saying I don't like it, right? Like you should be my friend enough to be like, okay, well, that's you don't like it, it's not for you. Everything's not for you. Some of these hype sneakers are terrible,
yeah,
and I know a lot of sneaker designers getting their feelings about it, or these sneaker collaborators, but they're terrible. Like I would not wear them. It's not for me. It's not something I like. So my opinion, it's not a good. It's not good. They can
Well,
get up. People can get upset at me all they want, but it's the truth.
for sure, but I think that's like an important thing for people to remember, right? Like if every sneaker that was meant for you, you'd have, more sneakers than me, and that's a terrible thing, right? Like if every
It's just
sneaker is meant for you,
absolutely terrible thing.
you literally have like hundreds of thousands of sneakers. But so you made a good point about like kind of the way that the outfit used to kind of be sneaker first, and obviously now we kind of live in this time where everything is talked about to the level of sneakers, where you know I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, you didn't have, you might have a few people where it's like, oh, what hoodie is LeBron wearing? What hoodie is, whomever wearing? How do you, as a, a sneaker store owner slash, streetwear brand, how do you think of creating like your prospect branded stuff compared to like, the sneakers that are coming out, right? Because if you have access to be able to see the, like you said, having the reps bring in the samples and stuff like that, is there time for you to say, cool, I can turn some stuff around to, kind of align with this? So potentially you could put together the full fit for people through prospect, or are you still kind of in this, it's, I don't know, like that seems like an interesting topic considering you're able to see the change. Like, how do you adjust for that?
That's it's you can. So what again? What we tried to do is we tried to do a little bit of both, right? Because you see what's coming out, but you also don't want to be too matchy, right? It's like the guy in the gym when you go to play basketball. He's wearing a full Kobe fit, right? And you're like, dude, we know you can't play basketball. Why are you wearing Kobe fit from head to toe, right? Jersey, Lakers shorts, Laker socks. He got a Laker headband. Like you don't want to be too matchy from head to toe, right? But you want to have like something that complements, right? So if a New Balance is dropping, they just dropped the 550, it's black and thing, right? The black and silver or whatever it is, like something like that. We probably could have done like the black and 3M. We could have probably brought back the black and 3M just a kid from Dago shirt to go with it, right? So like that a complement piece. It doesn't have to be full matchy, right? Or
Yeah.
it might have like a little bit of Carolina blue in it. So you might have a little bit of a shirt with something with a little bit of Carolina blue. So you kind of want to have a few pieces to create that Instagram perfect outfit because that's what sells, right? Because people don't really want to think about outfits anymore. They just want something handed to them and say, "Here's a fit," right? I mean, you see all the time on these, shows where we see all these shows where people go and buy sneakers and buy fits and they just buy exactly what's on a mannequin or something like that, right? Like there's no like I mean, I remember back in the days you had to on Nike Talk, you had to get creative, right? Like you buying Grape Fives and you're like, oh, what can go with the Grape Fives? Oh, you know what? Let me go cop the old, Charlotte Hornets throwback or something like that, or like you got to hunt for it to make it to get creative, right? Let's be real, Charlotte Hornets, Grape Fives, like that's just something someone you just match the colors to make it look right, and you have to get creative with it, right? Whereas now it's like people are just going to the store and just buying something straight off the mannequin or something straight off from like whatever the model is on the on you see online, right? Well, because it's online now, so you just have a model online, so they're buying that whole fit, right? And I've been to websites where it says shop this outfit, and I'm like, no, I don't want to shop this outfit. I just want the sneaker, right? So yeah, you see all this stuff, and I mean, I'm sure a lot of brands probably curate and do their private label stuff to that. We haven't tried it out. We just tried to. I mean, for one, most of our products are kind of San Diego inspiration driven, right? Because the problem with San Diego community is there's so much that lies in San Diego community, and no one really knows that, right? So unless you understand unless you live here and you kind of like explore San Diego and see the rich history of San Diego, you just kind of gets lost, right? So what we try to do is like we've tried to like a lot of products we've tried to like theme them or name them after like places in San Diego, parts of San Diego history, or it's themed after something in San Diego related. So like there's a backstory, right? Like well, for example, we'd go to one of these places and draw some inspiration. You kind of think about it and try to tie a story back into it, right? Instead of just dropping some colors. So I would say probably 75% of the stuff is like that. The other stuff is just kind of like the other stuff is just kind of the other stuff is just kind of like, hey, maybe we can figure something out to matchy with these sneakers that are dropping. But for the most part, we try to do most stuff that are related to San Diego in some way, shape, or form, right? And we try to tie that story back because I mean we've talked about it. The story part of all this stuff, the story part of all this stuff is super important, right? Like having a backstory is and telling the rich history is something that's important for I don't know I think for brands, right? Like for me, I know you're a huge Allen Iverson fan, so I can use the Allen Iverson story, right? Like his story is super fascinating. So regardless of what I buy Iversons, I bought a lot of Iversons just because I supported his story resonates with me, right? Now the hardships he went through and everything. So I think that having the story behind it is really important. So, and then we just expose San Diego in a light, right? Because I know everyone thinks of San Diego as just a beach community. It doesn't have streetwear, but when you get into the weeds of it, like you roam around the city of San Diego, there's so much. If you go to Escondido, there's so much history up there. If you go to Oceanside, there's so much history up
Yeah.
there, right? I mean, a lot of people still don't realize that Oceanside Pier is the longest wooden standing pier in all of San Diego coastline still, right? Like it's the oldest and the longest one. And that's like I mean, some people might not care, but those are like important, history parts of the San Diego County that it's important, right? And I think a lot of for it is like a lot of us for our product, private label stuff is more branded around the city, right? Like what's going on in the city. And I mean, it's cool to do like, everything else, right? Like promote every other part of the world and everything. But you live in San Diego, why not just represent San Diego? And it doesn't have to be a San Diego city skyline on every shirt. It doesn't have to say the word San Diego on every shirt, right? I mean, we did the December Nights flannels, right? Because December Nights, I don't know if you know, it's like huge in Balboa. It was huge before the pandemic
Yeah.
in Balboa Park, right? It's almost like a whole 2 3 day event where you just go and it's like concerts and everyone is in Balboa Park, and it's chilly, right? It's late in the afternoon. So we did flannels to represent December Nights, right? Different colors to represent, the different color lights and the different people there. And it was a big thing because we wanted people to realize that, like December Nights is a thing in San Diego. We pulled inspiration from it. That's why it's called the December Nights flannel, right? Just like the Carlsbad Valentine's tea, right? The prospect was written in flowers, right? It's little flowers from the flower fields in Carlsbad. It's huge in San Diego. If I mean the flower fields, when you're driving by them, you can see them, right? And people go there for Valentine's Day, and you pick flower. You can pick flowers for your bae, and you hit her with a love ballad of some sort, or whatever the case, whatever you're into, right? But it's like huge, right? Like, and that's like that's what I'm saying. So if you've never been to San Diego and you wonder about the Carlsbad flower fields. Now the tea is named after it, so you can be like, oh, let me go peek this, let me go check this one next time I'm going to in California, because I feel like everyone comes to San Diego and they go to the zoo, SeaWorld, Legoland, and what and
Beach.
the Wild Animal Park, right? That's what they know, right? But there's so much more to San Diego, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many hidden gems, right? Like we're dropping the Presidio pack, right? Like Presidio Park, right? It's a little park that it used to be. It was a fort. It's a fort and a mission that was for settlers, right? The settlers, when they came to San Diego, They built this fort and the mission to protect the people, so that way, when they were getting attacked, they had this fort. It's like all that little stuff is just built in San Diego. So you kind of have to draw the inspiration. I think it's like a mix of trying to not be matchy and trying to, still sell the city and drawing some inspiration from the city, right? Like to me, it's super important to make sure that the city is represented in our products, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's something like I guess like I've always admired about the way you do it, because there's so much nuance to the products that you're making that people don't really get to see unless they understand and get to like, read the story on the site or whatever, or social. But I guess like going back to, like your journey with all this streetwear stuff, one, like you spent many years in the service. Salute. Thank you. I get to do this shit because of people like you. But also like like that experience probably, you know, getting to travel around the world, I assume shaped the way you like create products, look at products, but also the way you probably look at San Diego and look a little bit closer at things than, you know, most people that are just like sitting in traffic, let me get home and turn on the TV and be done
Yeah.
with it kind of. So how
Yeah,
do
I
you relate
mean,
that, you know, through like the products that you're making?
it's crazy because I mean, I remember going to Japan. We were in Japan, and we were you when you're in Japan, you have like short liberty, right? Like they probably give you a few hours liberty, right? So everyone's trying to go to the bars and get drunk, or trying to go hook up with some chick somewhere or something, right? Me and others, we're going for sneakers, right? Because we're sneaker nerds, so we're going out. We're trying to. And remember, there's no real internet back then, right? So all you're seeing is from like old magazines, Soul Collector magazines, probably back in the day, or like random, you know, just kind of stuff that you heard from someone else you knew from New York, who parents traveled to New York or something, right? And then all this information combined, and you're just hunting, right? And you can't speak. I can't speak Japanese. I don't know. I don't know how to speak Japanese, but English was a little bit, a common language across the world, right? So you would be like able to ask, you'd see some guy with some Nikes, and you'd be like, "Yo, where'd you get those? Where can I go buy?" So you want to hit all these Japanese spots, right? And this is before, you know, really sneaker became super mainstream, right? Like it was a little mainstream, it was like a little underground, but like buying the CO.JPs, all those things back in the day. And you'd go overseas and you'd go, and I was like 12, 13. So, and most Japanese people have smaller feet. So you'd go into these places and there'd be like walls of sneakers as just 12 and 13s. And you'd be like, yeah, let me see what I can get. But you also got to remember you're traveling with the military, so you have limited space. So you could probably get one, maybe two pairs. I remember when I was there, the Bread 11s came out, right, in Japan. It came out in Japan first before it came out in the US. I remember buying three pairs. So a girl I was dating at the time, she wore a size 6, I believe. So I bought a pair for her, and I bought two 12s for myself. And I mean, we were fighting to get them because it was early over there, right? And we were getting them months early. And I remember I was a boot in the military, right? I spent my whole paycheck buying three pairs of Jordan 11s, Bread Jordan 11s, And so I remember she's having it in New York, right? Early, and then me having these two pairs, and I'm like, okay, well, she has it early in New York, but I'm in Japan with everybody else, and guess what? Everybody else has it, right? So, and then you kind of meet people and you start to talk to people, and you realize, like, like, damn, Japan's a dope culture, and you kind of get some influence on their style and how they do things, right? Even going to places like Guam, or when you're in Europe, right? When you're in Europe, you see, it's complete. The style is a lot different than it is in the US, right? Like they're more like form fitting stuff. They've always been to like more form fitting, kind of clean wear. Where we hip hop took over, and we were in super and baggy jeans. At some point everyone was wearing, except me. I'm pretty sure I wasn't wearing Junko jeans. I'm still waiting for them to come back. It's gonna come back. Junko jeans is gonna make a comeback, and they were expensive too when they were out, right? So I mean that was a trend. So, but most Europeans, I mean, I've kind of gravitated to the runners, right? Like Jordans are cool, but I've always gravitated to the runners look, right? So for me, like that's always been like something that when I buy products for, or when we make products, is like, how is this going to look with some runners, right? Whether it's an Air Max One, whether it's a 577 or a 576, or 574, like, or some Saucony Shadows, or just some whatever, right? Or some DMXs from Reebok, or whatever the case may be. Is like, how is this going to look with some runners, right? Because I've always been into retro runners, right? And Jordans are cool, high tops are cool, and it's a thing, right? Everyone's into it, but retro runners I've kind of gravitated more to over the years. So most of the product, I've kind of always, just from seeing different people across the world, weird, right? Because in Japan, yeah, they love Jordans, but they also wear a lot of runners, right? You think of like the Atmos Air Max ones, in Europe, runners are a big thing, right? If you notice, most of the sneakers, Pata, and those European brands that have ever done are like mainly more retro runners, right? So they've kind of focused, because that's a big trend over there, right? It's only in the U.S. where I think most of the Jordans are probably sell, right? I'm sure it's kind of transcended more now, because I think I read that China, they sell a lot of LeBrons, and those high top basketball shoes, right? But for the most part, retro runners have always been my thing. So I mean, you know that. So it's kind of one of those things where that's kind of always been kind of like a core inspiration for me also is like how will this look if I wear some sweats and some runners, or if I wear some jeans and some runners, or can I wear some dress, can I wear a suit with some retro with some Air Max ones and a tie and still pull it off, right? But that's the kind of, I think that's how over the years going to all these different countries, have kind of influenced me because I've seen that you can pretty much do retro runners with almost in every style, right? I mean, you think Japan, you think Europe, you think the US, even in the Caribbean, right? In the Caribbean, they wear, it's kind of changed now because it's more West driven. So you'll see a lot of Jordans and stuff, but in the Caribbean, it was more like soccer was a big thing in it, football, they call it in the Caribbean, but football was a big thing in the Caribbean. So, Umbros were big,
Yeah.
Adidas Sambas were big. You hardly saw any Nike stuff. If you had Nike soccer shoes, you were well off, right? But so you'd see a lot of Umbros was a big thing. Pumas were a big thing. Adidas Sambas were a big thing. So like those were, I mean, I still have a pair of Umbros that's probably, I mean, I've been in the US for 20 something years. I still have them, right? Like, I mean, they're trash, but I never got rid of them because that's the shoe I wore.
Yep.
And when I came up to the US, right? And I just kept them, right? But it's one of those things where those are the shoes those are the kind of trends over the years, right? Not the big, bulky, like I don't know, over the top, high top sneakers that people wear, like Balenciagas. It's not really a thing for me. I would never wear that. It's just too much, right? Like it's just not my style. I'd rather much wear some kill shots, right, or something, or some trail, or some Tune Air runners or something, 96 Air Maxes over Balenciagas. Call me crazy, right? If I had a choice between both of them, I'll probably wear a pair of Air Max or a pair of 997, 998s over Balenciagas any given day, right? So I
Yeah.
think that over the years, just me traveling and I pay attention to people wearing retro runners, right? I was just in the airport and some girl was wearing she was wearing the Serena 97s from Off White. I love those sneakers, man. I just love those sneakers. And she was wearing them, and I was surprised because she didn't really look like And again, you can't really tell who's a person into sneakers, but I saw her wearing them, and I was like, oh, and I saw her from a distance. I'm like, wow, that's crazy, right? And I love those sneakers, so and I was like, okay, well, she's wearing it, and she was in like you could tell she was traveling for work because she was in like a pants, skirt suit. She had her
Hmm.
blazer on, and she obviously probably had her heels in a bag, right? But she had those on, and she was walking through the airport with her bag, and I'm like, and it looks so dope, right? Because she was wearing like a gray skirt suit, right? And I'm like, see, you can wear runners with almost anything, right? So it's just, I think that is probably one of the main influences that I've gotten from traveling over the years, right? Just that runners look, right?
Yeah. It's yeah, it is crazy how it's evolved into like that being, more of universally accepted, right? Like I think sneakers as a whole has become more accepted, but also like thinking about non-sneaker nerds, how an Air Max 90 retro, since they dropped a bunch from this last year, that's something that like I could totally see even like my dad wearing at this point, right? Like, which I wouldn't have
Yeah,
said that
yeah.
10 or 20 years ago, but um so like in regards to that, right? Obviously with the pandemic, everything kind of shifted. You have to figure out like, you know, one, you're traveling less. I know you do a little bit of traveling for like the day job, but like you're traveling much less than you probably did before. And then you also got to figure out how to almost like focus in on like, okay, is this, like do you open the store, part time? Do you like just move towards online? Tell me like how that worked for you, but then also like what do you think, where's it all headed? Are you like is I don't remember where lockdowns are at down there in San Diego right now, but I think we're slowly, everybody's slowly moving past this. Although I think you and I both agree that this is a long this is going to be a long road.
Yeah, this is a long road. So I mean, so we were leaving the old space in PBM, moving to a bigger space in North Park was kind of the transition, and then pandemic happened right in that period of time, right? Luckily, the owner was super cool, old Marine vet. He just said, he's like, yo, I completely understand what's going on. I don't want you guys to come in here and be locked down and just pay me a bunch of money, right? He was and I applaud him for that super chill. I still talk to him. We still kind of go back and back once a month at least. So I think the hardest part for most smaller retailers, including ourselves, is how most of our sales wasn't really generated online, right? It's more of people who go into boutiques. I mean, people who go into boutiques, consignment shops, they're going in for an experience, right? Like, I mean, again, we can talk about the kit, we can talk about the ALD stuff, right? Like, people who are going into those places are going for an experience, right? If you go into Foot Locker, you're not going for an experience, right? Because Foot Locker is Foot Locker, right? But when you go into smaller boutiques, retail spaces, like you're trying to go in for experience, right? Experience. You're going in for some sort of conversation. You're going in for something different, right? That you would get at a Foot Locker or Finish Line or whatever the case may be. So I think it's going to be really tough to sell that experience online because a website's a website, right? Yeah, you can make it faster. Yeah, you can make it prettier, but a website's a website, right? What differs in the retail experiences when you go into a store, you run into somebody like, say, a Nick, right, who knows sneakers, right? He's wearing some crazy Reebok questions that you've never seen in your life, right? And it just draws your attention. It's from McDonald's All Star, whatever the case may be. It's a PE, I know like it's something crazy, right? And that's that conversation, right? And the crazy part is, which is the part that's crazier, sorry, is that in San Diego there's a lot of tourists, right? So people come here, like a dude is coming here with his girl, right? He's into sneakers. He's seeking out those small boutiques, right, to shop at, right? So he wants to go in there and chop it up with the guy in there, see what he has on his foot, right? So he can, like do something for the gram, right? Flick it up for the gram, right? And that experience is not there anymore. So it's going to be really tough for most smaller retailer boutiques to just say, I'm just going to transcend online. Because let's be real, it's not that easy for a smaller. It's easier now in this day and age, but it's a red ocean market, right? Like there's a lot of sharks out there. There's a lot of people competing against it, right? So you're not really getting the unique experience, right? Unless you do like some crazy website where it's like a crazy virtual experience to shop, and and I'm sure somebody will, right? Like you put on some Halo lens and you can go in and you can shop and you can kind of be in the store experience, and that's probably where it's headed. But right now, retail shops, events, and that experience is what people look for, right? Like having that event, that in-store event, is kind of like, you know, what's important. I mean, I look back to the Soul Lab days, right? Like we had those art and sneaker stuff like once a month or whatever. And I mean, I remember one time, this is before we got an ASUS account, the rep was like, he didn't know if, people in San Diego was really into lifestyle ASICs. He didn't know. He lived in Carlsbad too, right? Older guy. Glenn's a great guy, loved him, love him. He's like, he didn't know. I was like, Glenn, just come to one of our events, right? Literally, I told him, I was like, just come to one of our events, right? Friday night, I'm like, worst that could happen, you get free beer and you get some pizza. That's the worst that could happen, right? And you get to talk to me. That's the worst three things that could happen, right? He came out. I mean, that probably it wasn't one of the most attended one we had, but it was a pretty big one. I mean, the guest book had like I probably could look online on the guest book. There's probably like 110 people in our little shop in Oceanside, right? And that's a lot of people in that little shop, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and we had no AC, so it was a hot box, right? It was like if it was a pandemic, everyone in there would have gotten COVID, right? Because it was a hot box. But everyone came out, right? Like people from far and wide. I mean, there are people who came out with their top sneakers. I mean, I still have a sneaker circle picture somewhere. I have pictures of people holding up all their sneakers, and it's crazy because those events, I mean, a lot of people got to know each other because of, that event, right? Like I met a lot of people in San Diego who were into sneakers, people met each other who were into sneakers. I remember years later, I worked at one of my previous corporate jobs and some guy who got hired, he's like, he came to my office and he's like, yo, you own Soul Lab, right? I was like, yeah. I was like, you don't remember me? He's like, nah. He's like, yo, I was at one of your art show stuff. So we had the videos, and I went back and I looked at some of the videos, and lo and behold, he's in the video, and me and him are talking, and we met, right? So it's like crazy to think that those events bring people together, and that's really drives like the community, right? The culture, right? That drives it big time because then you get to meet people, right? I know Zoom is cool and FaceTime is cool, all that stuff online is cool, but that in-person experience it's unbeatable, right? Like you just can't beat it, right? I remember even in the prospect shop, right? There were guys who were into sneakers who would just come in the shop just to chop it up and talk sneakers. It'd be a Saturday. This guy should probably be out with his girl, I mean, he probably got out of the house to be away from his girl, right? Or whatever the case may be. But he would come into the shop and just talk sneakers, right? Like chop it up, right? Like there was one guy who worked at New Balance for a while, and he was doing sales now for medical stuff in San Diego. And he would come into the shop. He was still a New Balance fan, but he would come into the shop and just chop it up and talk sneakers with us, right? And it's like this is that community feel is not there anymore, right? Because the pandemic has, stopped that pretty much. So I think a lot of retail spaces will have to it will have to go back to in person in some magnitude. Events will have to come back in some magnitude, right? I mean, we talked about doing different events in the new space, right? Like me, you talked about this quite a bit, right? And like that event and that community space is kind of needed, right? Like I mean, we talk
Yeah.
about like having a unified space for like sneaker culture, and that's and just for like people to learn about sneakers, right? Like I think it's a little bit different learning online because it's like school, right? Like you can learn school all day long from a book, but that in-person learning and that in-person interaction will like stay with you forever, right? Because part of that conversation just remains with you. So I think that at some point it's going to have to go back to in retail. I mean, it's going to be slow transition. Um, I'm actually surprised to see a lot of small boutiques opening multiple stores across states now, right? New stores across states, right? I mean, you see corporate announce one. There's other stores that are announcing other new locations all over, which
Yeah.
it's surprising to me, right? Because they probably know something that we don't, right? Oh, they've probably been in the works for a while, right? But still, it's kind of it has to go back to that event thing, right? I mean, it's just one of those things that just has to come back because for smaller boutiques to really survive and to really like thrive in this space, that event and in-person feeling really has to go. I mean, Sneaker Politics had that block party thing like every Sunday, right? Which
Yeah.
was huge for the city. I mean, I went one time when I was down there, and like it's crazy, dude. It's like everyone. I mean, it's a Jordan Brand event, but it's crazy because it's like it's literally like just a block party every Sunday, and you're like, this is great for sneakers, and
Yep.
like that's part of the culture, right? Like people come in, you see someone with a rare Jordan that you've never seen in your life, a PE or something like that, right? So I think that part has to come back. For us, I think that it's going to be a little tough because, again, San Diego is a huge tourism town, right? And without that tourism, we're kind of dead in the water, right? Like we might have a small space at some point, right? But we're kind of dead in the water, and we will kind of have to figure out some sort of online, mechanism that could propel us, right? Whereas San Diego, I was just reading that San Diego tourism, the hotel industry is down at least 67% still right now, right? And even though they're opening San Diego back up, and you see a few tourists downtown. I mean, I live downtown, so I see a few tourists here or there, but most of the places aren't, they're just not doing well. Like if you
Yeah.
walk downtown right now, there's so many coffee shops, so many restaurants just gone, right?
Yep.
Because one of the ladies at the coffee shop said that she makes her annual operation expenses just off Comic Con, and we
Wow.
didn't have Comic Con
Yeah.
last year. So imagine just losing your entire year's worth of of revenue just from Comic Con not being there, right? So you're completely dead in the water. And I'm not even sure if they're going to have it this year, right? Because I mean, they haven't really come up with any sort of my friend who works at the convention center. She said they've been working and selling and pitching all these convention ideas, right? And they have a lot of good ideas in place, but it's for all the corporations to actually believe in it and buy into it, right? So once that those ideas are bought into, then they'll probably have it. And she said that Comic Con, she predicts that stuff will be back. She said this to me a while ago, at least. She said that stuff will be back, excuse me, April or May, but we'll see, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people still need to get vaccinated for herd immunity. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. But I definitely think that that community feel will have to come back, right? You wrote in one of your outside the box newsletters that talking about the Nike Melrose stuff, right? And that that was a good starting position for Nike to bring it in. My personal opinion, they didn't utilize that platform well enough, right? Because I mean, if you think of LA, right? LA is I don't know a mecca for sneakers, right?
Yeah.
It's summertime all year round. Like it's pretty much it gets what 55 degrees.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's cold, right? I mean, it's cold for us because we're wearing a hoodie or whatever, but it's a mecca, right? For I mean, people say New York, right? But in the wintertime, New York is dead for sneakers. Let's be real, right? Like no one is in New York right now is could be saying, "Oh, I'm gonna rock my off-white Jordan ones," right? It's winter out there. It's like 12 inches of snow.
Yeah.
Someone in LA is probably wearing theirs right now, right?
Yeah.
So I always debate this with people in New York. I'm like, LA probably has a beat because it's summertime all year round. You can wear jeans and sneakers all year round. So I just think Nike didn't properly utilize that Melrose, spot that they did, that neighborhood spot they did. If they had tapped into the community, right? Use people like you, people like Jock, people like what's I forgot Jeffrey, right? Jeffrey. If
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
people like those, all the people in the community who are big in the community and utilize it and done more to bring more awareness, right? They could have. I mean, think of Nike should have hosted a sneaker history event, right? Where they just do, you know, to have you talk about the history of sneakers and you just go through like different, there's stuff in the archive. Like those are dope things they could have done to utilize that space to bring more education to, we talk about this all the time, the education in sneakers to people, right? And I think it would have been more valuable, right? It's not going to cost Nike a whole lot of money to have some Gatorade, some pieces of pizza. They could have tapped into the local community and just have them be part of it, right? And it was a squandered opportunity, I think, right? And it's corporate being corporate again, right? They didn't really utilize the corporate stuff, right? And I'm sure someone in the boardroom right now is probably kicking themselves and saying, "Damn, we squandered the opportunity," right? Because I mean, that's a perfect opportunity for them to had promote a Black Lives movement, right?
Yep.
Instead of waiting for something to happen, that was a perfect opportunity for them to tap into the low socioeconomic community, tap into the Black creators in LA. All the guys from Bricks and Wood, Circulate, all those guys, they've been producing products for a while, right?
Yep.
Why didn't Nike tap into them, right? They've been on Melrose and Fairfax all the time. They could have tapped into those guys and try to promote the Black movement, right? Before the Black Lives Matters thing. So that's why I feel like it was a huge squandered opportunity, right? And again, I'm trying to keep my reservations as neutral as possible, but I have my how to handle this stuff, right? A lot of these companies don't handle it properly, and they don't tap into the community as much as they should, right? And that's why I was telling you, like, working with smaller brands, up and coming brands, isn't cool anymore. It's just not cool, right? I mean, why would Nike be tapping into all the top people who are already famous? Like, you got to start with the people who are grassroots, right? Like, promote their story, right? I mean, that's what made like Tiger Woods, right? Because of his grassroots story. LeBron James, Allen Iverson getting, this lifetime Reebok dealer, right? Like those stories are great because it's like you tap into grassroots. You're not really just going for the star player. Like they gave Zion Williams a Nike deal. They could have, I'm sure there's some other great NBA college player who could have got a good Nike deal. He's probably just as good, but he's not getting the shine or the limelight as Zion, right? So yeah, it was just that Melrose thing was just a huge squandered opportunity, man.
Yeah. So do you think, like, obviously with Prospect and, like talking about community and how you've been able to kind of build a community around the shop there. And one, I think that when we get to go back to some sort of normal life, I've probably said this on a podcast before, but like, I'm just going to literally be walking into places hugging people like, "Yo, it's just good to see you. I don't even know you, but like, I'm just happy to be buying a coffee, a burrito, a pair of shoes. Like, I just want to support people because I miss it." So I think like genuinely other people are going to feel that same way, right? We all been kind of cooped up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you've had to work through this, even if you've had to travel within all of this pandemic, you're still missing a lot of the human connection. Do you think that, I agree with you, obviously living right there close to the Melrose store for a few years. It was only there for, I think, less than a year, but I think it was cool that they did something. I think, yeah, they absolutely missed the mark with like what they could have done. Do you think that it's possible for the brands to really do that? Or do you think that like that's where, something like Prospect comes in, where like you are the actual, I think personally that like, brands almost can never do that because like you almost have to have somebody who's local in the community, and not to pick on people that work for big corporations, but like when you work for a big corporation, your mindset has to shift to, make sure that the orders, that the work is sent back up the chain and you get the approvals from above you, rather than like being somebody that's just like out and about in the community, whether you're a shop owner or, working in the community, you're supporting the shops. It feels like to me that someone like you that has a store in a place where, like San Diego or LA, Melrose, wherever you want to put it, that gives you like a much more personal and like, deeper connection with the people in the neighborhood than a brand can even ever have, even if they got the big pile of money behind them.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, like our community really was built on like, I admittedly the backs of the guys who worked in the shop, right? Like Alex, Nina, Shay, Josh, Sarah, Uriah, all those guys were born and raised in San Diego, so they have that community feel, that community ties already, right? Whether and I mean, they're all younger, right? So they're into all the stuff that my wash self isn't really into, right? Like Josh spinning, Alex and Nina, running through the Mirror Mason community, Uriah being close to all the guys in the on the bar scene, Josh, it's just Sarah being like she's into modeling stuff, so all that was kind of tied into the community, right? Even Jay being, cool with Rossi Rock and, Leon and all those guys, right? So it's kind of like the community was built on everyone coming together and kind of tying that together, right? That's what the community is. The hard thing about the community is actually, I know a lot of these communities believe that, oh yeah, no one wants to support our community, but the community doesn't support itself 9 or 10 times, right? Like they don't want to band together to actually form the community to make it bigger. So I think that's where it's tough for a lot of brands because they might have one person that they can tap into, but the rest of the people won't want to support that one person because they're like, oh, well, not adjusting, Nike is pushing Justin. Why should we support it? Why didn't Nike support me? Right. And I think that's where the problem is. They don't look at it as a bigger picture, right? Like if Nike is supporting Prospect, right, and they give us some deal to push something, right, and we decide, okay, cool, then all the other shops or all the other people shouldn't be pissed off, right? They should be like, okay, well, this is for San Diego. This is not just Prospect. This is bigger than that, right? This is bigger than, Prospect. This is for San Diego because it's like, small on the map. We're trying to put the city on. So I think that's where a lot of community stuff is has some disparity because they don't really support each other, right? And I think that there are people in the community that you can reach out to, the elder statesman or whoever, to kind of give them that reins to kind of do a lot of free power thing to push the brand in the community to make the community better, right? And they just don't reach out to it. And there's a few reasons, right? I know everyone thinks a collab is just a collab. It's easy to do, right? No, there's so much legalities in it, right? I mean, Saucony did collabs where they couldn't release because of legal issues, right? And I mean, as much as people don't see both sides of it, right? America is sue happy, right? I remember in undergrad, one of my college professors was suing the college he was working for. So he had a lawsuit against the school, and he was still teaching me, right? So, I mean, America is sue happy. So if Saucony or New Balance or Nike put out something, they have to run it by all the lawyers, right, and run it by everyone to make sure it's not a legal nightmare down the road, right? Because you don't want to. The last thing you want to do is get some sort of lawsuit, right? Especially the big
Yep.
organization that you can potentially lose, right? So I think a lot of people don't realize that, right? They get frustrated with the brands and all that stuff, right? The brands have a checklist, and they to protect the brand, right, in the long run, right? I know people say any marketing is good marketing. That's not true, right? It could be bad. It could kill the brand, right? Let's be honest, right?
Yep.
So there's a checklist that they have to follow to make sure that if I'm going to if I'm going to grab prospect and push them to do something, guess what? We got to go down the checklist, and make sure this dude abides by all the things that we do as a brand, and we're affiliated with this person, so that way, we don't have a lawsuit coming back. Does this dude has, you know, drug dealers chasing him down the block every day? We probably don't want to be affiliated with them, right? Because we don't want to be having an event and there's a drive-by going on in PB, right? Let's
Yeah.
be real, right? So, and I think people don't understand that, and that's why, and they also don't want to, and for from my experience, a lot of people get greedy, right? They don't think of, like it's an opportunity. Let me experience this opportunity, learn from this opportunity, and grow. Right? I remember we were trying to Saucony, we were trying to do that 30th shadow thing. I still have the video. I never posted. I probably should post it at some point. But we were trying to do the 30th anniversary of the shadow, right? And Shadow 5000, and we did the video, and we were talking to them or whatever, right? And I was trying to explain to the guys at the shop like why it has to be done a certain way and why things have to be a certain way. That's because I had already spoken to the reps, and they told me like the legal stuff and the background stuff, and and I try to explain it to people, and they're like, well, why can't we just do it our way? I was like, no, because your way is probably inexperienced, so we do it your way, and there's a whole lawsuit comes about. Somebody has to pay for that, right? Like who's
Yeah.
paying for all these lawyers, right? Like the brand isn't trying to pay for lawyers to support our lawsuit. No. So I think that's where the problem lies is everyone wants to do it their way, but they don't understand like legalities, the process in play and stuff like that, right? So they get mad at all these brands and they get mad at how they do stuff. Oh, I want to do this way. Okay, yeah, you want to do the shoot this way with this addition. Now we have to create a mold for you to do a special shoe, right? Like the Garcia foam posits, right? Like I'm sure all these people are pissed off because they never were able to do a new foam posit style. But yeah, they have to create a new mold for this shoe for you,
Yeah.
right? Like you're not in the big grand scheme of things, so it can't be done your way. Like you have to follow the process. So I think it's tough because they can tap into the community. And I think we had enough people who kind of represented different parts of the community in San Diego, and where you can kind of tie people in. So you would get, I'd say maybe 70% of the support. When we had the Tangerine event, that was crazy because that was like people from every little part of that community, you really see them come out, right? Like, and it was
Yeah.
really interesting. And that kind of transcended things because then a lot of people started hitting us up for events, right? And we're like, okay, well, you want to do an event, like what's your event plan? How do you want to plan it? They had no idea what they want to do. Everyone just saw that the success of Tangerine and just thought that we were like club promoters or event promoters. No, that's not where we are. Will support you, but you got to have a plan, right? And then when you tell us your plan, we'll tell you like you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that, right? And these are the reasons why. So now go back and reformulate your plan. So I think that's where the community part comes in is like everyone being able to come together, educate each other and support each other. And that's why I feel like it's tough in most places for just a big brand to come in and do it because they don't understand that it's not as easy as they want it to be, right? Like you can't
Yep.
just say, "Oh, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it my way," because it's not that way, right? Because there's two parts to it. You can't do it your way, and then the brand has to protect themselves legally, right? So that's why I feel like a lot of it just isn't doesn't really mesh well because there's a lot of egos in play. Also, people want to do it their way, and then if the brand don't support it their way, then they go online. You see it all the time. The
Yeah.
brand don't do it your way, they go online and slam their brand, and you're like, dude, the brand, like, did you read the contract? Did
Yeah.
you understand what was going on for the brand? So yeah, so it's just a mess, man. But I said to say it is possible if done in the right way, right? Because it seems like a lot of these brands are investing in people to have like good community relations, good community feel, right? So I think that they've been doing a lot of good stuff. I mean, Matt with corporate does bigger than sneakers, right?
Yep.
That's a big event. I'm sure he probably gets a lot of support for that. So stuff like that where they give back to the community, right? Those are important things, right? Um, Ronnie just did the Knicks thing. I mean, I know it's Knicks and whatever. Everyone hates the Knicks. Knicks tape all year, baby. But I just think that it's giving back to the community is like a big thing, right? Like if you're a Knicks fan, like I remember going to the Garden and you buying tickets for like $26, right? I mean, I lived in New York and I remember we went to the Knicks game. It was like $36 for a ticket. You got pretty decent seats. Knicks was trash, right? Now it's everyone is a Knicks fan. Like you can't buy a ticket. This is even before the Nets were in Brooklyn, right? They're still in Jersey.
Yep.
And this, so it's just different, right? So that community feel is still kind of there, right? Ryan did the M3 thing. That was huge. The BMW thing, because it brought a lot of the. I mean, we talked about this before, like doing something with Honda for
Yeah.
Acura, right? For something big for related because that car community is a big thing, right? Like everyone who's a BMW fan was hyped about it. They don't even know who Kith is. They never bought something from Kith. They didn't even know. They don't even know who the owner is, but they know it's BMW, and BMW pushed it. So that was a big thing for the BMW community, M3 community. So that's where Can you imagine imagine you doing something like that for like Acura, right, or Honda, right? That's
Yep.
like major, right? And like you do something Type R related, right? And like everyone who's a Type R enthusiast just comes out the woodwork. They don't even know who the hell Thatcher is. They don't know who Nick is. They don't know who Sneaker History is, but they know these three people, entities, just did something for Type R. Like
Yeah.
some crazy Type R, and then all of a sudden that community is built, right? But one, you will have to understand what the legalities are for Honda, and then Honda has to put their trust in you, right? So that's where, and I guess, and also you can't let your ego come into play, right? Because you don't know what it takes to build a car. I mean, yeah, you do to build a car in your garage,
Yeah.
but on a massive scale level and all the legalities they have to go through, we don't know what it takes, right? Like,
Yep.
they have hundreds of lawyers just on payroll for that. So I think that's where the brands and the local community people don't mesh, right? There's some sort of ego part, and don't want to be educated. That the theme of education comes back again. Like educate the person on how we do the process and how it goes versus the brands, so the brands could put their trust in you, right? Like if I'm a brand, I'm not gonna want to put my trust into someone who just comes in the boardroom with ego, right? And I know it's cool to be, I want to do it my way, I want to do it this way. The brand, I want the freedom, like same thing Kanye did back in the days with Nike, right?
Yep.
But I'm sure they do everything for a reason, right? All these rules are written in blood, right? One of my drill instructors used to say in boot camp, right? Rules are written in blood, right? Like someone somewhere before screwed something up, so they had to make this rule, right? And it's not personal against you. It's just that it's a precautionary measure. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's where that big disparity is between the brands and the local community, man. And I wish that it wasn't like that, right? I mean, can you imagine Nike putting up basketball courts back in the day, right? You know, spending money to revamp all basketball courts in low socioeconomic communities.
Yep.
How dope would that be, right? Like those are things. I mean, I told you about the time we were in Iraq, and we wrote Nike to get a basketball hoop sent to us to Iraq, and we never got anything. No one ever said anything back to us. We wrote and one out of all the brands. We wrote and one because and one mixtapes were huge back then. We wrote and one. They literally sent us a bunch of shoes, a bunch of jerseys, a bunch of basketball shorts, two full basketball hoops, basketballs. I mean, they sent us like it was boxes of stuff, right? And
Yeah.
you're like, out of all the brands, and one did this, right? And Nike could have easily done it, right? I mean, they make military Air Force Ones or military Air Force Ones like crazy back in the day. We support the military, right? I mean, that's just a ploy, right? Like, and one genuine. I mean, and one didn't have to do that. They were a smaller brand.
Yeah.
Everyone in Iraq, like people were rocking and ones. I mean, we had full court press with two basketball hoops, full setup. They sent us, right? We built it up, and I mean, I'm sure I could find pictures of it, right? And we had like full and one jerseys and Tai Chis and stuff like that, right? And and you're like, I mean, half those guys didn't even know who and one was, right? Because
Yep.
Nike was the big basketball brand, but they didn't support us at the time, right? I remember I mean, the lady, she sent us all that stuff, and she sent us some cards, and there was a picture of the team that sent us all this stuff, right? And then we just signed the flag, and some flags, and like we had some flag memorabilia stuff, and we signed it to them. We took pictures and we sent it back to them, and we kept in contact throughout deployment, right? But
Yeah.
it's crazy because you would think out of Nike would, it's an American brand, and they make military themed sneakers all the time and armed forces sneakers, but when the armed forces really needs you, you're not there to support us, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think like you get into like the politics of corporate and the too many people, having their hand in the cookie jar in terms of making decisions, right? When like, and one
Yeah,
is probably
yeah,
small enough to just
yeah,
be like,
yeah,
look, this is for the right reasons. This is a good thing. We should just do this. They do it. And the crazy part is like, I bet you nobody at and one at that time ever talked about it in any public space, right? Like, it was never on the internet. It
No,
was never like, let's get this in a magazine to say we did this good thing for, you know,
no.
yeah. But I don't know, man. It's pretty crazy. So I've had you on for a while. I'm gonna end it on that. Like, I think that's like actually really important for people to understand, like how they come, whether that's to you as a shop owner or a brand or someone working at the brand, like just being able to kind of try to understand both sides, right? Because I think we've had that conversation many times where, you run into these issues where things, you always want things to go, a certain way in your mind, but like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
compromise there at every step. And so my last question before we get out, in 2021, are you opening a shop? Are you suggesting that 18-year-old that's hungry to get into the sneaker game and open his own shop opens a shop, or are you still holding out and waiting until pandemic is completely said and done, and then doing it?
I would say do it. I know it might sound risky, but I think you have to do it, right? Because again, it goes back to what we said, right? It's that community feel, that event feel. I mean, I remember when the internet first came on board and you could buy sneakers online. Everyone's like, retail is dead, retail is dead. And I mean, sneaker nerd or not, old guard or new sneakerhead, you still want to go into a sneaker shop and buy sneakers and talk to people, right? I mean, every time I go somewhere, I search out all the boutiques in the area, right? Consignment shops or whatever, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll hit them up and see what's going on, right? I mean, I think that still exists, and I think especially with everyone being cooped up in the house for the past year, right? People are dying to get out and go do something, right? Whether it's sneaker related, whether it's just go to a bar, whether they go to a movie, to a museum or something, right? People are dying to get out. So if you're 18 years old and you're trying to open up a shop, trying to do something, just go do it, right? I mean, the worst case scenario, it doesn't work out, right? You learn something, or it might just flourish, right? And you might just grow beyond, any your wildest dreams, right? So I think it's just go do it, right? I mean, I'm probably gonna do it. I've been toying with the idea. I've been looking at different spaces continuously, trying to figure it out. And it's really just you just got to do it, man. Not Nike's not paying me in any way, shape, or form. No brand is paying me in any way, shape, or form. I mean, Prospect's not even paying me right now. So I think that you really just have to do it, right? And it's because what happens is if you don't. I mean, we talked about this, right? You said it in the newsletter. Is like all these smaller retailers are just getting swallowed up, gobbled up by these big conglomerates, right? And I think my personal opinion, a lot of these smaller, when they get gobbled up, they lose their luster, right? It's not because now they have to conform to the corporate rules, right? Like you said, everyone has their hands in the cookie jar. So when you're small and independent, you kind of have your own rules and you can kind of play by your own rules and do things. There's less people to run things by, right? So when I think the smaller retail space has to kind of stay alive somehow, some way. Otherwise, the culture just becomes hype piece culture, right? There's no one learning. There's no true, And then let's be real, right? If you a small brand like I hope Master P, and this is my personal opinion, I hope Master P and Baron Davis gets to buy Reebok, right? Because I feel like I don't want the brand to fade away, right? I mean, again,
Yeah.
you wrote about this also in the outside the box sneak. I don't want the brand to fade away, right? And that's what could possibly happen is the brand could fade away under this massive conglomerate, right? I mean, yeah, they'll still have all the hype collabs and everything, but it's not the same when you're, like I remember, I forgot the shop. There's a shop in Ohio. They did some crazy sneaker release, right? Because the people were saying they were backdooring all these sneakers. So what they did is they took their backdoor and they created a window and they were selling the sneakers out the back door it's just a joke, right? As a
Yep.
meme
That's
because
awesome.
people were saying they were backdooring all the sneakers, right? I forgot the name of the sneakers. They're in Ohio, they're in Columbus. But yeah, so that's the kind of fun things that like small boutiques can do,
Yeah,
right?
you can
Like
only do
because you
that
can
as a small
create your
boutique.
own work way, right?
Yep.
Yeah, right. But when you have like a big corporate parent, right? Like you're answering to someone now, right? It's almost like you're answering to the man, right? So you have to run these things by them. There's somebody, I know they say, oh, we're still independent. You're really not, right? Like you have to answer to someone because you're entity under that big conglomerate, right? So if you get sued, guess who's getting sued also, right?
Yeah.
Like it's gonna roll back to them, right? So yeah, so I would say that 18-year-old, just go do it, man. Even if you do a 500 square foot space, a 400 square foot space, you buy a printer and you put it in your parents' basement or your parents' living room, and you just print it out your room or whatever the case may be. Just go do it and, just explore, right? Because that's literally what it is, right? It's just exploring, trying to figure out, what works, what don't work, and you might get that hit where LeBron is coming down the tunnel in, some one of your product, and
Yep.
all of a sudden you wake up the next morning and you have 1,000 orders, and you're like, I have a one t-shirt press, and I have to go to school today, so I don't know if I'm gonna print all these today. So yeah, it's worth a shot, right? That's the worst case. It's worth a shot. So I'd say go do it. I'm gonna do it. You and I talked about it a lot. Something has to happen, right? So we'll do it. So we'll be fine.
Yep. Yep. All right, man. Well, it's been awesome to chat with you. I guess let everybody know where they can
I
find
mean, sorry the
Prospect.
streets can't see the bear head, man. I'm sorry the streets can't see the bear
Hey, I
head,
might
but
still use that for the
next time they'll
thumbnail.
get to see. Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah, it was good chopping up, man. Always great talking to you. It was good time. Once in a while we catch up. It's not the same as texting, but
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
we'll definitely be catching up. I'm sure sooner or later. Yeah, I need to take a trip up there at some point,
yeah.
so we'll see. So, all
Definitely,
right,
man. All right, man. Well, thanks again, and thanks everybody for tuning in, listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
all right, peace.